Glad to welcome everyone. I'm Dr. Vasyl Chaika, and today we'll talk about how you can restore your liver at home. We will go over the algorithms for liver recovery using food, phytotherapy, and other methods. We will also discuss the myths related to liver recovery, as well as what you shouldn't do, or when your cleansing might actually harm your liver. Let's get started. First, let's review the functions of the liver. The first and main function is detoxification. The liver neutralizes all toxins, medications, and poisons that enter our body. It does not accumulate poisons or toxins, but rather neutralizes them. And most of these poisons are neutralized with the help of a certain substance. This is called cytochrome P450 in the liver. And you can easily check this yourself. When you open, for example, a medication and look, it says that these drugs are metabolized through cytochrome P450. What else? The liver is a very important organ that is involved in the production of bile. That's why the bile synthesized by the liver, whether you have a gallbladder or not, the liver still secretes about 1,200 milliliters of bile per day. And this bile is necessary for activating pancreatic enzymes. It's needed for emulsifying fats. It's needed for activating intestinal peristalsis. It is bile that performs the detoxification function in the intestines. It creates conditions that prevent putrefactive bacteria from developing in the intestines and so on. So this is also an important function of bile. What else does the liver do? It participates in the synthesis of cholesterol. And cholesterol, as we already know, is very necessary for our body. So as not to dwell on it now, I recommend you simply watch this video about cholesterol. And also, an important function of the liver is actually the regulation of hormone levels. In particular, this refers to hormones that are transported by proteins such as estrogen, testosterone, and others. Because the liver is capable, just so you know, in catastrophic conditions when there is a food shortage and our body needs constant renewal, because that's how we are built, of synthesizing proteins using the nitrogen found in urine. That is our body in critical conditions. Of course, this doesn't last a lifetime, but for a short period, in order to survive, the body is able to produce its own proteins. However, when liver function is impaired, we can see it. First, it's visible externally. How does this manifest? Symptoms such as snoring, if for example we snore at night, are a sign of impaired liver function. Next, there is flaking, for example, in this area, which is the projection zone of the liver, right here between the eyebrows. For example, this includes pain and clicking in the temporomandibular joint, especially when there hasn't been any trauma. It can also be the presence of teeth marks on the tongue. Redness of the eyes, meaning a pronounced vascular pattern on the eyes, is another sign. Frequent constipation, for example. Bloating of the intestines. All of these are signs of liver dysfunction. And if we restore liver function, all these symptoms disappear. So let's move on to how exactly we need to restore the liver. Understanding the function of the liver, and specifically its role in synthesizing bile in this case, we need to create conditions for this bile to flow out. So essentially, normalizing the outflow of bile from the liver so that it doesn't stagnate in the liver ducts and so there is no bile stasis in the gallbladder is what we call the method of liver cleansing. The liver is a filter, and you are always shown that image of your filter being clogged. And so the liver needs to be intensively cleansed. Where does the myth lie here? It's in the fact that the body is a self-restoring system. So your filter cleans itself. Your task is to improve bile flow. And of course, there are a huge number of methods for this. There are methods that are physiologically correct. For example, this can be done with the help of food, or for instance with herbal mixtures. There are also so-called emergency cleansing methods, such as blind intubation. This can be done both in medical facilities and at home using various substances as well. But what should you remember here and what should you be careful about? If you stimulate bile secretion too intensively, which is what is called liver cleansing, you can reduce its detoxifying function. What will this lead to? You may notice that a large number of red spots, similar to moles, start appearing on your body, particularly on the skin surface. The appearance of a large number of these red spots, also known as liver tears, indicates that you have overloaded your liver with improper cleansing methods. So let's cleanse or restore the liver at home the right way. Where should we start? So the first thing we need to start with is to reduce the pressure in the duodenum and in the intestines. To do this, each of you needs to stop eating foods that cause gas formation, as these are individual for everyone. These foods are different for each person. For example, some people get bloated from apples, some from cabbage, some from borscht, and others from something else. That is, you individually eliminate the foods that cause bloating for you. The next step is to use specific remedies or treatments that help to stimulate the flow of bile in the body. So, what are these remedies? The first is fatty foods. What is included in fatty foods? These are animal fats and vegetable fats. And so, a vivid example of animal fat is lard. Therefore, you can safely consume 15 at most 20 grams of lard per day. You can salt this lard. You can eat it fresh, frozen, it doesn't matter. But remember that the amount of this fat, this lard, should be individualized. For some, 10 grams is suitable, for others 20, and for some 25. If you don't consume animal fats, you should use plant-based fats. What are those? These are various kinds of oils, and it doesn't matter what the oil is called. Olive oil, sunflower oil, flaxseed oil, or canola oil. It doesn't matter what it is. You use it daily, for example, by adding it to salads. What is the dosage? A total of 10 to 15 milliliters of this plant oil per day is enough for you. Of course, there are methods where people are told to use only oil and your liver will literally become healthy in 2 days. That's a lie. The liver doesn't become normal in such a short time, for example, or during procedures like intubation. You're simply stimulating bile flow, and that's it. It just lowers the pressure in the bile ducts. So please remember that you can't restore your liver in 2 days, and you can't even restore it in a week. With this method, you're only normalizing bile flow. Next, what else is included here? These are spicy foods. So what are spicy foods? These are horseradish, garlic, the same mustard, and various kinds of spices. That is, you can safely consume them, but again, how much should you eat? You should consume them in an amount that is comfortable for you. Some people can eat a whole clove of garlic, while others can only eat half. And some people can't eat garlic at all, so they can have horseradish instead. You don't have to eat all of these foods. The foods you eat should be individual for each of you, in an individual dose. And you can easily select them just by trying. For example, if you eat 2 cloves of garlic and you get bloating, you already know that this dose is too much for you. And someone, for instance, can eat horseradish, while someone else can eat mustard. So once again, I'll emphasize that all of this is individual. This should be included in your diet at least 2 to 3 times a week. An additional product is sour food, meaning all pickled and salted items, pickled cucumbers, pickled tomatoes, pickled cabbage, in doses that are comfortable for you, small amounts. So those who stocked up in the fall with all these pickled foods and who didn't rest during the summer but kept working, now, finally, they can calmly focus on restoring their liver. Remember this, there is no product that only restores the liver. Whether it's nuts, fats, or acids, all of these stimulate bile secretion. And it's precisely when bile flows properly that it reduces pressure in the liver ducts and improves liver function. Additionally, consuming bitter foods is also beneficial. So what are bitter foods? For example, black radish. In our region, viburnum berries as well. Anything with a bitter taste stimulates bile flow. That's why by eating a little bit of bitter radish every day, or for example just a few berries of viburnum, this will already help stimulate your bile flow. Now that you understand the products, let's move on to other methods that can stimulate bile flow and improve liver function. These are herbal blends. There isn't any unique herbal blend. The point of all these herbal blends is to further improve bile flow. Now on your screen, you can see an example of a blend that, in my opinion, is optimal for liver recovery. And you can consume it specifically as a decoction. Choose refusals. Steep these herbs in half a liter of water, then strain it, and over the course of a day, you should consume this half liter. You take it for 2 weeks, then take a 2-week break. The next month, again, take it for 2 weeks, then another break. In the 3rd month, take it for 2 weeks, and then take another break. This approach is sufficient to stimulate bile flow. What do you need to remember? If you can't immediately take such a dose, for example, half a liter of the decoction per day because it's very bitter, you can start, for example, with 250 milliliters and then over 2 weeks work up to half a liter. You can do this kind of prevention twice a year. But let's also talk about what else can be done additionally to help restore the liver. Now, what can we do specifically to regenerate liver cells? Let me take another look at this. Specifically, regeneration. Before this, we normalized bile flow, created excellent conditions for bile drainage, and now it's time for the actual regeneration of liver cells. Right now, you can see on your screens a recipe that, in my opinion, is also the most optimal for liver regeneration. And by using this recipe, you can cure fatty liver disease, improve the condition in cases of liver cirrhosis, and generally improve your state. In various types of hepatitis, especially when we are going through the recovery process after hepatitis. What do you need to remember? This is a very important point. When we stimulate bile flow, we can achieve results literally in 2 to 3 days. The bile starts flowing and everything seems fine, but the liver cells themselves regenerate slowly. That's why it takes us 12 to 18 months to restore the liver tissue itself. That's why I recommend following this regimen for 12 to 18 months. Use these recommendations. Stay healthy. If you find this video interesting, share it and subscribe to my channel.